Hey, look, another video essay about game design. Sort of. Well, I did put it to the vote, and this got most of those votes, so here we are. This is a subject that I've been thinking about for a while now, especially during a good chunk of my game reviews as of late. This idea of style versus graphics, and how that can greatly affect the impact and potential staying power of a game or franchise. Though, of course, I'll have to define what I mean first, and naturally when I'm talking about this, please take it all with a grain of salt. I'm biased, and obviously this idea isn't going to apply to everything, but I just wanted to air my thoughts on this, you know? So, in this debate, graphics are raw visual fidelity, the maximum amount of detail and effects you can add into a game to, generally speaking, make it look as good as possible. Doesn't matter necessarily what the environment is or anything like that, but that's where style comes in. In contrast, style is conforming your graphics and art direction to usually a more specific design. Style is more about the art than pure graphical power, if that makes any sense. Now, naturally these two can mesh together and make some really good games. They're not totally exclusive to each other, obviously, but you can tell with some games that they will focus on one much more than the other. And this is me essentially explaining why I believe if you focus on style a bit more than the graphics, it generally ends up a little bit better. To me, style makes a game look much more consistent, unique, memorable, and most of the time far better than the game that's focused on graphics. And obviously I'm going to need some examples here, so let's get into that. So, importantly, what kinds of examples am I thinking of when I say style? Well, some good examples of this would be games like Hi-Fi Rush, Persona 5, Where the Water Tastes Like Wine, Cyberpunk, or even the Spider-Man games. These are all games with a very clear and distinct art direction that makes them and/or their characters and/or worlds stand out, looking unique, coherent, and memorable, or some combination of those three. Some have pretty high graphical fidelity and extremely, sometimes overly detailed, environments and models like in Cyberpunk. But like Cyberpunk, it serves a purpose and makes the game visually distinct, and it suits the world in general. Part of Cyberpunk's entire shtick is that it's over-designed cybernetics. Even just the little details can make game worlds feel unique to themselves and the characters within them. For instance, the New York City in the Spider-Man games is a New York that has clearly been influenced by Spider-Man. The raft is off in the distance. There are billboard ads from James Jonah Jameson's podcast. There are buildings like the Bugle, which are entirely unique to the Spider-Man version of New York. If you took out Spider-Man and replaced it with some random New York-based character, it wouldn't feel right. You'd get those reminders that this isn't just any version of New York. It's Spider-Man's New York. It's Marvel's New York. The art direction and style of these games is consistent and unique, either through details in the environment or through just the way everything is drawn and shaded, such as the cel-shaded graphic style of Where the Water Tastes Like Wine or Hi-Fi Rush, which makes it hard to not just see those games as anything but a unified whole. And frankly, to me, it also means that most of these games won't age nearly as poorly as other games which are about the graphics tend to. Speaking of which, the graphics. I think a really good example of how an obsession with graphics begins to degrade a game's visuals is the Halo franchise. I love Halo. I've loved Halo since I was a small child, watching some older kids play Halo 3 since I wasn't allowed to play that kind of game for a few more years. And something about Halo that most people can see as being a distinct part of its identity is its graphical style. The environments, the technology, the power armor. Think about it, Master Chief barely has any lines throughout the entire Halo trilogy, and yet that distinct silhouette, that specific shade of green, that armor which peaked in Halo 3 lives on as a cornerstone of the video game industry and the myriad of characters it created. The game focuses on some good graphics, yes, but it also has a distinct art style to go with it, to make it unified, to make it complete. The armor designs really peaked in reach though, with Bungie taking that simple and memorable design and adding just enough grit to make it really look like the armor of soldiers, instead of just pure supermen. But then Bungie left Halo. Their support studio, 343, is left to take up the mantle, and we immediately begin to see some intense over-designing for the sake of really showing off just how amazing their graphics are. Everything is covered in little dots and lines, the armor itself is made more of a piecemeal thing to allow Spartans to move faster or have more flexibility. The grit has been lost as more and more needless detail and junk is added on to the various designs, slowly dragging the style through the metaphorical mud in favor of trying to show off how much detail you can throw at something, regardless of whether it looks good or not. This is what I mean when I talk about style versus graphics. How an obsession with graphics makes a game lose its identity. And I've got one more example to show you for this. God of War. God of War is a beautiful game. It really is. The environments are amazing, the characters look great. It's some of the best looking game art that I've seen this console generation. So what's my problem with it? It's generic. It's meaningless. It's absolutely beautiful, yes, but it's basically the most beautiful thing you could find when you search for generic Norse mythology on Google. There's very little about it that's unique compared to other games about Norse myth. And Kratos, most of all, just feels wrong amidst all of this. He's a Greek character made specifically for a mythical Greek setting. His presence in this world is effectively meaningless aside from being able to slap the God of War label on it and call it a day. You could replace Kratos with any other sad Nordic warrior dad guy, give him a dark past, and it would be the exact same game. There's nothing here that makes this game distinctly God of War. You can easily swap out the God of War parts for generic Norse stuff, and nothing will have fundamentally changed. Part of this comes back to the fact that, well, Kratos destroyed the entire world that he used to be a part of, so there's really nothing to link him to. Which, to me, signals that the God of War games should have ended after Kratos literally destroyed the entire Greek mythological world. But this franchise is too profitable for them to ever do that. This also calls back to what I was talking about before with Spider-Man. In that game, New York is New York, yes, but there are elements added to it through the environment and world building that make this version of New York intrinsically linked with Spider-Man. God of War practically seems to go out of its way to avoid that. Hell, it's part of the story that Kratos is avoiding anything from his past. The only things here that are unique to God of War are Kratos, the occasional reference, and the Blades of Chaos. If you take out Kratos and the Blades and replace it with a Norseman and a special axe he used to wield when he was a legendary Viking or something, you fundamentally have the same story in the same exact world. There's nothing about the world you have to change to accommodate the fact that it's not God of War anymore, you know? The world is beautiful, but it's not unique to God of War. And that's my biggest reason why I praise style over graphics. It makes games feel unique. It prevents them from aging out once graphics technology advances even further in the next few years. It's why so many Call of Duty games nowadays are just hard to look at, because they were meant to be really good graphically intensive games. But that means now they don't look very good because our graphic tech is so much better. When you focus too hard on graphics, you have a tendency to end with something that either looks over-designed or generic, and it all lives under the threat of being aged out by better technology. Whereas style, as seen in Team Fortress 2, Persona, Hi-Fi Rush, Portal even, it has a tendency to be timeless. That's not to say any of these games I think look bad, or that it's bad to focus on graphics. That's fine, I get it, you want to push the technology. This is just a word of caution, in a sense, that maybe make sure you still have a unifying art direction and you're not just trying to pump up the graphics as hard as you can, because otherwise you might strip your game of what makes it truly unique visually. This has been TheRatMan, and I will see you all later.